Hello and welcome to another episode of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Christina Hagen, zooming to you live from Cape Town, South Africa. Unfortunately, here, as in many other parts of the world, we are back in a higher level of lockdown with the COVID-19 third wave currently wreaking havoc in various parts of the country. So I hope that wherever you find yourselves this evening, that you and your loved ones are safe and that you're doing what you can to limit the spread of this truly awful disease. Our thoughts go out to the many families affected by this pandemic and everyone who's lost loved ones. This evening, we are visiting another Sandparks birding area, this time to the garden route, to learn all the tips from someone who knows it very well. Mike Bridgeford is the current president of BirdLife Plettenberg Bay, and he's immensely knowledgeable about this area, having birded here or birded there for over 20 years. But before we begin, please remember that you, our audience, can communicate with us using the Zoom chat room, and any questions for our speaker can be posted into the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and we'll get to as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can use the comment feed for your chats and questions. If you would like to get in touch with us via our social media channels, please use the hashtag Conservation Conversations. All of our previous episodes are available on the BirdLife South Africa YouTube channel and our podcast. Now, we're very close to 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So we'd like to ask you to please all subscribe to the channel and help us grow support for our video content. We're only 91 people away from 1,000. And there are over 400 people on this Zoom tonight. So please, 91 of you, please join us on YouTube. We are now half a year into this season of Conservation Conversations. And if you're enjoying this series and can afford to support it financially, every little bit helps to keep this webinar free for all to learn and enjoy. You can simply scan the Quicket QR code on screen or visit the Conservation Conversations website to find the link to the donations tab. And we'd like to say a very big thank you to everyone who's donated so far. The registrations for the virtual African Bird Fair are open, and this year's event is set to take place on the 30th and 31st of July. To book your spot for our incredible lineup of speakers and workshops, which includes Chris Packham, the UK-based conservation television presenter, and David Lindo, the urban birder, you can visit eventmobi.com/birdfair to register. And I'll post these links in the chat once the webinar has started. Now, the tickets for BirdLife South Africa's annual jackpot birding competition are almost sold out, so please get in there and buy your ticket if you haven't yet. You stand a chance to win 100,000 Rand cash prize with an additional three prizes valued at 10,000 Rand each. Entry into the draw is only 5,000 Rand, and all proceeds go, 500 Rand. All proceeds go towards giving conservation wings. So be sure to bag your chance to win this exciting prize by visiting the BirdLife South Africa website. Now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our presenter tonight, Mike Bridgeford. Mike is a retired mechanical mining engineer with a passion for birding. He has traveled widely on birding trips in Africa and around the world. And you'll see from his presentation that he's also a very keen bird photographer. Mike has been a very good friend to BirdLife South Africa and was the chairman of the organization from 1998 to 2002. He has also been the chairman of BirdLife Inkwazi and BirdLife Plettenberg Bay, where he's now the current president. I've known Mike for a number of years now and very much look forward to his presentation. He's a very knowledgeable birder, and if you have followed any of his posts on social media, you'll see an accomplished photographer too. So Mike, I'm very much looking forward to this. You can switch on your video and start sharing your screen and take it away. There we go. We can see your screen. If you just get it into the presentation, there we go.
Good evening, Christina, and to the 490 odd people that are listening this evening from all over the world. It's a cold evening here in Plettenberg Bay, as it is in most of the Western Cape, but I hope some of you have got some warm weather. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the Garden Route National Parks and birding in specific. The Garden Route National Park is not like any normal park. In 1964, the Tsitsikamma National Park was proclaimed. That is the area to the right of your screen, which says Nature's Valley and Storms River. In 1985, the Wilderness and Knysna Lakes region was formed, and currently the park stands at about 157,000 hectares, and it consists of 3 regions: Wilderness, Sedgefield, Knysna, Millwood and Diepwalla, and then the Nature's Valley and Storms River being the Tsitsikamma section. For this particular talk, I'm going to assume that the park starts at Wilderness and finishes at Storms River mouth. So I'm going to include those areas that are not strictly part of the park, because after all, this is a birding talk, and birds don't restrict boundaries at all. You'll note that there are 4 blue spots. The blue spots are the national park's official camps: Wilderness, a very small one at Diepwalla, one at Nature's Valley, and Storms River mouth. They are typical wooden cottages, self-accommodating. However, if you're doing a tour of this area, there are plenty of first-class 5-star hotels down to lots of bed and breakfasts all over the route. So accommodation is not really a problem here at all. So let's start with the birding. We'll start at the Wilderness Lake System, and we'll take you on a virtual birding tour through Knysna and its environs, and then to the Greater Tsitsikamma, which will include Plettenberg Bay, Nature's Valley, and Storms River. This area is particularly important. It has 2 important bird and biodiversity areas: the Tsitsikamma and Robberg, the Wilderness and Sedgefield Lakes. And in South Africa, we've got 112 of these registered sites. In the next slide, I'll tell you a little more about the IBAs. The MPAs, which are the marine protected areas, Tsitsikamma, Robberg, and Chokama, adds to the diversity and the protection of this particular area. We also have 1 Ramsar site, which is a strategic wetland area, which is the Wilderness Lakes. We've got 27 of these in South Africa. And to add more accolades onto the area, UNESCO has declared the Garden Route Biosphere Reserve as one of their prime sites. World Heritage Sites are Nelson's Bay Cave and Lungkloof Valley. So there's a lot of speciality about this particular area. If you just have a quick look at the IBA's, important bird and biodiversity areas, the criteria to be registered internationally, must have one of the 4 criteria. There must be threatened species, range restricted species, these are endemic birds, biome restricted assemblages, and congregatory water birds or terrestrial birds, which you'll see as we go along. So these are not just South African important bird areas, these are from BirdLife International, and this is an international classification. All right, there are a few things you should know. If you go online, and you'll see the sandparks.org at the bottom, you can get an online version of this little booklet. which will tell you everything you need to know about the national park, the Garden Route National Park. Alternatively, you can pop into one of their offices, and this is available in hard copy. The other very useful information is the guide to the Garden Route, a recently published book by Jacana in 2017, and it's available in all bookshops. So with these two pieces of information, you should be well set up to explore the Garden Route. All right, now the most important thing that I think about the Garden Route is the number of endemic species that we have in the area. The first column on the left-hand side is the true endemic birds. That means they're only found in South Africa. The second column is the near-endemic birds, which means 70% of the birds are found in South Africa, and probably the 30% is found in Southern Africa. And then the last column is the SLS, which is Swaziland, Lesotho, and South Africa. And these are really the same as the endemic birds. They just go over into two other countries, small countries. So we've got 25 Garden Route endemics, and that's quite a lot. Let's start with the tour. And we're going to start at the Wilderness Lake System. There are bird trails, half-collared kingfisher trail, the brown-hooded kingfisher trail, the Woodville Forest, and the Rondaflay bird hide. In this area, we're looking for our key species would be Nisan terreca, Cape Atlas, Chorister robin-chat, greater crested grebe, black-necked grebe, macawa duck, great painted snipe, and Neisner warbler. Now, whilst I may show birds in one specific area, they can generally be found right across the national park. So if you see a picture of a bird, I've tried not to duplicate it throughout the talk, but in reality, you'll find them all the way along the Garden Route. The park starts at the Ebb and Flow Rest Camp in Wilderness. And as you can see, it's quite a beautiful place. There's a camp in the background, and I'm standing on the railway bridge looking at the camp. From the wilderness, it goes through a serpentine river, and you can see quite why it's called the Serpentine River. And that goes into another lake, which is called Island Lake. And once again, you can see the island there, so you know why it's called Island Lake. This goes on to two other lakes as well, forming the whole protected area in this part of the Garden Route. If you go a little bit up into the wood, you have a place called Woodville, which is above Neisner, and they have a very dense natural forest, and some of the original large trees are still on show here. Most of them were burnt down in the 1886 fire. But some of them have survived, and you'll find them here. This is true thick endemic forests where you get all your endemic birds, all your forest endemic birds. There's a few trails, half-collared kingfisher trail for those interested in walking and seeing birds. Although at this point in time there is no charge, a permit is required, and it's normally a self-served, self-sealed permit which you're supposed to carry with you. The Rondaflay hide is probably one of the best hides that we've got in the Garden Route, and I'm going to show you a little bit about it now. It's a long route through into the water, across the marshland, and there's the hide, and you can see my very good friend on the left, Bruce Ward-Smith, sitting there waiting for birds to land in front of him. And the Parks Board have put perch sticks up there so that when you're sitting in the hide, you can see all the birds that come around. Fish eagles, we have 4 or 5 breeding pairs in this area, and many breeding pairs right across the Garden Route. They're quite majestic to see, and sitting in the hide, there's nothing more pleasurable than hearing the cry of a fish eagle and watching birds. African swamp hen, The bird quite commonly found here. It's a terrible name for the bird. They used to call it a gallinule, which I really subscribe to the name, but it really is now an African swamp hen. And it's got these massive feet, and they parade up and down in front of the hide. We have 3 species of grebes that can all be seen from the hide here. Greater crested grebe, the black-necked grebe. In the summertime, you can see hundreds and thousands of these birds in the middle of the lake from the hide. And then, of course, our little grebe or dabchick can be seen pottering around in front of the hide. These photographs were all taken from the hide by myself. There's a little stick which you may recognize if you go to this hide, and I caught 3 pied kingfishers all looking at something to the left, and I thought it really made a nice little photograph. The malachite kingfisher is one of those birds that everybody likes to photograph, and it sits in front of the hide. In fact, it nests underneath the hide, and so it pops out and stretches its wings, and you get that photograph that everybody wants of the malachite kingfisher. It's such a beautiful little bird. And in Afrikaans, they call the bird the keefkop visvanger. And for those of you who can translate that, it really means a squiff-haired fish catcher. And you can see from this photograph exactly why it's called that. It's a very descriptive word. Greater painted snipe. I was very lucky to get 3 of them marching in a line in front of the hide. This was taken last year, not this year. And again, these birds come in during the summer months, and they're really special to see. Makoa duck, or tufted duck as it's sometimes called, because it has that upturned little tail, and this is the male bird. It's near threatened. And during the summer months, you can see that from the bird hide, and this was taken from the bird hide. I got one of the female too, but I'm not going to show that in this short talk. Redneck spurfowl. These birds are found from wilderness right up through the garden route. But below wilderness towards George, you only get the Cape spurfowl, which is a near-endemic bird. So there's a territory, which a very carefully marked territory where these birds don't cross, and that is around about the beginning of the park. I've not known that they've interbred at all, and I've never seen 2 of these species close together, but they do separate right at this point in time. It's quite unique. Then we move on from the wilderness area, and we head towards Knysna. And the birding locations here would be the Diepvalle Forest Station, the Woodburn Pan, Coney Glen, and then the pelagic trips. And here we'd be looking for forest buzzards, tambourine dove, blue mantle crested flycatcher, white-starred robin, Knysna tereka, Knysna woodpecker, Narina trogon, grey cuckoo-shrike, pied avocet, and peregrine falcon. And we start off with the Woodburn Pan. It's not open to the public, but you can park where I've taken the photograph from, and you see a lot of waders here during summertime, and sometimes we get some rare species like yellowlegs pop in for a quick wade in the water. Pied avocet are very common birds to see throughout the year here. And once you are finished at the pan, you can go over just to the left of the mouth, where there's a place called Coney Glen, and the mouth is just to the left of the glen here, where you go through the heads and out into the sea. But right in the top of the middle of this picture, you have peregrine falcons nesting, and they can be seen here from the car park at any time. This pair has been here for some years and successfully bred most years. It's a lovely bird, and if you really want to see peregrine, that's the best place to go and see them. Then we go back above Knysna to a place called Diepwalla, which is a natural forest. And here you've got quite a unique tented accommodation. It's all self-catering, and you sleep in these little tents, and your ablution and cooking facilities are to the right, but you're deep in the natural forest. Not for everybody, but it is quite unique. The Knysna elephant. In 1983, this was a carcass found and pre-assembled, but there's been a lot of studies done in the last year, and the final report was issued by the Parks Board, and there is one 42-year-old female left in the forest. There were thousands before the road was put down, joining the Natal with the Cape, but they've reduced to one now, and this particular female has fallen in love with an excavator, which may look something like it. We don't know what to do with this animal yet, but a decision will be made as well as to let it die naturally, to take it out, or to introduce others. It's quite a hot debating point, but there's one now. Cape Bathurst. This is one of my favorite little birds. You've got the male on the left and the female on the right. But if you notice something very strange about this bird, the male has a yellow eye and the female has an orange eye. There's not many species that have different eye colors as well as different colors to their breasts as well. But it's a fabulous little bird, and to find both of them is really special. Olive woodpecker. We've got 4 woodpecker species, the olive woodpecker, the Knysna woodpecker, the cardinal woodpecker, and the ground woodpecker. Olive woodpecker is probably the most common bird found in the forests, and this is a male bird, and it's actually feeding grubs to its chick in a nest. They are fairly easy to find in most of the forests throughout the entire Garden Route Park. The other bird that is quite unusual here, it's the only all grey bird we found in the area, and it's the grey cuckoo-shrike. It's an upper canopy bird, so you really have to get birders' neck when you go into these forests and stare right up at the top, and you hear this high-pitched whistle, and then you know you found the grey cuckoo-shrike. Another bird which is really difficult to find is a blue-mantled crested flycatcher, and you normally hear it before you see it. It's a lower canopy bird, and it's in the mountain and coastal forests, and it never sits still. This photograph's not mine, it was taken by Bruce Ford Smith, and you just have to be lucky enough to get this bird to sit still for one click of the camera, because that's all you're going to get. Cape White-eye. This is a near-endemic, and there are 3 different types of white-eye. You got the Cape White-eye, which is split into 2 subspecies. We've got the capensis subspecies in the Cape, which has the grey belly to it. As you go further up to East London, the grey becomes a bit yellow. And then you have the orange river white-eye and the yellow white-eye. Very special little birds, always gleaning in the canopy leaves. Fiscal flycatcher is another near-endemic, and this can be often confused with the southern fiscal, or the fiscal shrike as we used to call it, or the Jackie Hangman. But if you look closely at the beak, this bird has a narrow beak with hairs around the beginning of the beak, whereas the common fiscal has a very large beak. It also has different white patterns on the back. Greater double-collared sunbird. This is Swaziland, Lesotho, and South Africa, so it's another endemic. And it can be told apart from its cousin, the southern double-collared sunbird, by its very large red band and its large beak. This is a male bird. Very colorful bird, and it makes it even more beautiful if it sits on one of these proteas that you find in the fynbos. In Knysna, they have a pelagic trip that goes out from through the heads. So you're heading through the heads on this boat, and Tim Carr, excuse me, who is the birding guide, actually will organize these trips. You can just have a small group, or you can phone him and join an existing group. They see up to 20 to 30 different seabirds, and just sent me a few pictures to show what they saw on the last trip. Some of them: brown skewer, Manx shearwater, Wilson storm petrel, shy albatross, and many others. We then move from Knysna to the next section, which is the Greater Tsitsikamma, which includes Plettenberg Bay, Nature's Valley, and Storms River. And we start off at the Bitto River wetlands and Keerboom's estuary. And here we're looking at key species of African oystercatcher, white-fronted plover, blue cranes, osprey, grey plover, bar-tailed godwit, Eurasian curlew, kelp gull, white-backed night heron, Caspian tern, greater and lesser flamingo, forest buzzard, jackal buzzard, and Knysna warbler. The African black oystercatcher a few years ago was critically endangered, or at least endangered. It's now off the red data book, and we have, I think, up to 50 breeding pairs in the area, and they can be regularly seen on our beaches, mingling with people walking their dogs, unfortunately. But they're doing well and quite easy to find. The white-fronted plover, tiny little bird, that's often seen running like a very fast-moving bicycle along the shores of the lagoons. And although this looks like a fairly common bird, they live up to 25 years old, and their breeding success rate is very poor. There's a little chick, and it's just been ringed by the Nature's Valley Trust scientists. But if you look at some of the stats, we've got two sites, one at Nature's Valley in the green, and the Lookout Beach is in the orange. And the reason is the big difference is mainly people and their pets. And where you've got this little bird laying its eggs right on the shoreline where dogs walk, it's going to have a very low success rate. And Nature's Valley Trust have put together a program to actually inform people, to put little pegs around the nests to keep people and their dogs away. We've had dogs banned on the beaches, but unfortunately, it's not the dog's fault, but a lot of people just don't pay attention to it, and so the rates have not climbed that much. A lot of these little birds have gone locally extinct in areas south of us, but we're managing to keep them into a positive breeding state. Kelp gulls, we have a very large colony at the river mouth. It has some 3,000 breeding birds there, which makes it the largest land-based kelp gull colony in South Africa. And we decided to count all these so that we would know exactly what we had there and how we could protect them and what their problems and their habits were. We got a drone and we photographed the whole area. Here's a view from the drone, and the little white dots are all the nesting gulls. And one of the students from Nature's Valley Trust did an MSc on counting all these and producing a paper on the kelp gull colony. Here's two of the young ladies from Nature's Valley Trust who are ringing some of the chicks and ground proofing the flyover. So this was a very successful project, and the first time it had been introduced in South Africa. Greater flamingo and lesser flamingo are often seen in the bay. They're passing through, they don't nest here. They find there's enough food for them in the bay at certain times, but they normally spend a week, 2 weeks, and then they move on. Caspian terns, this is a vulnerable in the red data book. And we have 2 breeding pairs, and they breed in the kelp gull colony because they have protection there. But if somebody walks through the kelp gull colony and disturbs the birds, they kill the chicks. So it's quite a delicate balance, but we've managed to keep people out of the gull colony during the breeding season, and these birds have survived. Greater crested tern, or swift terns as they used to be called, or still are. We can have up to 3,000 come into the bay to roosts. They don't nest here. And it's quite spectacular when you take a photograph like this and all you can see is birds. A little further inland, but on the same system, we have 3 pairs of blue cranes that nest every year. And here is a photograph of mommy blue crane with her newly hatched chick, and daddy's got the other crane out of the photograph view. But these can be regularly seen. As most of you will know, they are South Africa's national bird, and they are near threatened. Goliath heron. Now, if you look at your books, you'll find Goliath herons not found in Plettenberg Bay or below. And it's one of those birds that we are seeing more and more from Plettenberg Bay right the way through the Garden Route Park. And the reasons are not quite known, but certainly this species is expanding its range and moving more into the Western Cape. African wood owl, in all the camps, you will find African wood owl, because the camps are all in natural forests, and that's where you'll normally find your wood owl. Special owl to find. You have 2 or 3 other species of owls as well, but this is the one that people really like to find. Up the Keerbums River, we have a pair of white-backed night herons, which are classified as vulnerable, and they're breeding. This was taken last year, and there were 5 of us on a small boat, and we managed to photograph the bird that came down to look for us. This is an extremely shy bird, and if you're going to go and try and find it, you have to ask one of the locals where it is, and then be very cautious about not disturbing the bird. And then, for a bit of fun, those of you who do atlasing, that's the South African Bird Atlas Project 2, we have a pentad, which is 1/10 of a degree longitude by 1/10 of a degree latitude, which is about 8 kilometers by 9 kilometers. And you count all the birds in that pentad during a 5-day period. This has got a high number of birds for the pentad, and this little bit of competition has started, and the maximum people, one person and his son has found, which is Mike Buchan and Adam, they found 187 birds in the 5 days, which is now currently the record for this pentad. There are 282, but you won't do that in 5 days. We then move to the Robberg Nature Reserve, where the key species are the Cape cormorant, the Cape grassbird, the Malachite sunbird, orange-breasted sunbird. You voted that one the most popular endemic. Southern double-collared sunbird, Cape siskin, southern chuggerer, Cape rock thrush, ground woodpecker, African black swift, and Karoo prinia. The Cape cormorant is an endangered species. We have more than 7,000 birds roosting on the peninsula, and that's about 10% of the world's population. So that's one of the things that goes heavily towards creating a special bird area. The southern chuggerer, we've got 2 breeding pairs on the peninsula. They're near endemics, and they're pretty hard to find, but if you know where they are, you can pick them up. And here's your favorite bird. It's a true endemic, orange-breasted sunbird, mostly found in the fynbos from from the Tsutsikaima National Park right the way down to Cape Town. This is a male bird, and they're easy to photograph and easy to see during the breeding season. Cape Siskin, this got the last vote, but I think it's a special little bird. They fly in little groups. It's an endemic, and you'll see them in groups of about 5 or 7 birds, and you'll hear them fly over you. Follow them. When they land, you can pick up a picture. Little white tips to the tail. Southern double-collared sunbird, a near-endemic. Again, it's got a smaller red breastband, and it's got this fantastically blue rump, which is not often seen. If you want a little bit of a walk on the Robberg, you go across the island, and there's a pair of ground woodpeckers there. This is also an endemic bird, but it's also found in Swaziland and Lesotho. The Cape rock thrush, similar, is often seen. This is a male bird with the very bright blue head and the fantastically orange body. The females, as normal with birds, is a little bit more drab than the male, but they are found all over the peninsula, and especially in the car park where you start your walks from. Cape grassbird is a near endemic. This little bird popped up with a grasshopper in its mouth. It's a near endemic, as I said, and found mainly in fynbos and associated vegetation. The Karoo prinia, and I love this shot. This is how the prinia sits. He looks for 2 sticks that he can stretch his legs apart on. I have no idea why, but he's happier when he's doing this. And I was very lucky to get this photograph of him looking at me saying, look what I can do. He's an near endemic. And Plet also runs pelagics, the same as Neisner, and Dr. Gwen Penry organizes the trips. Again, yellow-nosed albatross, Corrie shearwater, but here we find the Cape penguin, the African penguin. Not sure it might be called the Cape penguin now as well. These are endangered birds. I suspect they're going to be critically endangered one day, and there's a lot of work going in by BirdLife to try and establish another colony in the areas between the Garden Route National Park and Cape Town. We find that the birds get washed ashore because they swim down from Port Elizabeth from their natal colonies, and the young ones actually can't make it, and they come and land on the beaches, and we have to collect them and rehab them and then set them free again. Cape gannets, a vulnerable species as well, part of the Red Data Book. Shy albatross, Sabine's gull, common terns, and brown skua, which is also an endemic bird. And then we have the African jacana. Now, in the areas of the Garden Route National Park, we have ponds, freshwater ponds. And the African jacana has gradually been moving southwards. In Neisner and Plettenberg Bay area, we have breeding jacanas. And it's again one of those species that seems to be expanding its range and moving down towards the Western Cape and inland a bit. Same with the white-backed duck. If you look at some of the old books, they're not found in our Garden Route National Park, but they are now breeding in the same ponds that you find. So they also moving downwards, and they're breeding. I don't know why these birds are doing this. It's something to do with either breeding or food, but I'm sure in time, all our research will tell us why this is happening. Denham's bustards, if you go just above the forest area into the grasslands, the vulnerable Denham's bustard can be seen in the breeding season, up to 7 and 9 in a group, and a non-breeding season, the males and the females can be seen basically by themselves. Forest buzzard, there are 3 buzzards that are seen in the area here: the forest buzzard, common steppe buzzard, jackal buzzard. And The juvenile birds are very difficult to tell apart sometimes. In summer, it can be extremely tricky to tell the difference between a juvenile forest buzzard and a common steppe buzzard. In winter, where we are now, it's quite easy because the steppe buzzards have gone back home and the forest buzzards are basically all left by themselves. But it is an endemic bird and is quite easy to find in the Garden Route National Parks. One that's not so easy to find, and it's endemic, endangered bird, it's the African marsh harrier. And I took this photograph 2 years ago in a marshland outside Plettenberg Bay, and I've not seen one since. So whether they're becoming more difficult or whether I just can't find them anymore, they are quite a hard bird to find. Jackal buzzard, it's a near endemic, and the beautiful male has these fantastic colors, and the local bird ringers have started a program of capturing these birds and putting ID rings on them so that we can try and trace what they're doing and where they go. So if you see one of these birds with a black and orange ring on it, please see if you can read the number and let one of the guys know in the birding community where you found it, at what time, and then we can log it and track it. Here's one of the most sought after birds, and I think Christine hasn't seen this one yet. It's the Knysna warbler. It is a vulnerable species and it is endemic. And it is probably the most difficult, one of the most difficult little warblers to find in the garden route. You'll hear it, you'll see it scurrying around less than half a meter from you, but to get a photograph, you just have to be very lucky. But they are around, and the guys know spots where they frequent all the time. They like a tangled bush area. As you can see from those photographs, this is typical kind of habitat, but you can always find Knysna warblers, more so in the breeding season than in the non-breeding season. Cape sugarbirds, endemic species. They follow the protea blooming. So when the proteas aren't blooming, they head up the mountain to where the proteas are blooming. And in summertime, they're back on particularly the Robberg or in the fynbos where the proteas are blooming. Cape weaver is a near endemic bird. Its brilliant white eye will tell you that it is a Cape weaver and nothing else. And this is a male bird. And then we move on to Nature's Valley. And here you can see I've taken this photograph from the top of the hill, and you can see the lagoon spreading out to the mouth, and back to the right is the river. And we're looking at key species of Narina trogon, African finfoot, scaly-throated honeyguide, yellow-throated woodland warbler, Cape sugarbird, grey cuckoo shrike, half-collared kingfisher, white-starred robin, olive thrush, chorister robin chat, lemon dove, tambourine dove, terrestrial brown bull, and Victorine warbler. And in summertime, you can guarantee most of these birds. The Titsikama section has the Vassalot camp here, which is a typical wooden self-catering accommodation. And in the camp or around the camp in the wooded areas, you'll come across the Cape robin chat, chorister robin chat, which is an endemic bird, but also found in Swaziland and Lesotho. And this bird is quite remarkable in that it can imitate just about anything from a bicycle bell to Narina trogon. So you really hear something calling, you've got to make sure it's not this bird. Olive bush shrike. Here we have a special coloration or subspecies found in the garden route, and this is the buff morph. It's got a pinkish breast to it. As you go further north, the color becomes more yellow. Different calls to the ones up north, the same as the bobo, it makes different calls. They obviously have a different language when they live down in the garden route. Scaly-throated honeyguide is one of these loud, repetitive noises. He's a brood parasite, and he parasitizes woodpeckers in particular, in general, sorry, and in particular the Neisner woodpecker. It's a forest canopy bird, and it feeds, strangely enough, on beeswax, larvae, and insects. And here you can see it on an old hive, taking the beeswax out, which it can digest. And the Neisner tereka is an endemic bird, also in Lesotho and Swaziland, and it's got to be the iconic bird of the whole park. They can be seen throughout the year, and their rasping calls are very strange, guttural sound for a strikingly beautiful bird, which looks like it's been painted as a model. And if you're very lucky and see one fly across, you can see these incredible red wings, which just typifies the Neisner tereka, still called by most as the Neisner lory. We'll forgive you. Cape bulbul is an endemic bird. He's got the white ring and the yellow rump. And the little swee waxbill is a near-endemic. And this is a male bird. They are forest edge birds and will sneak into the to gardens where people put up seed trays. And this is a male bird with the black face. Forest canary, also an endemic, but Lesotho and Swaziland as well. Large bill, a yellow-green eye stripe, and this yellow-green coloration, again founded on the edges of the forests and moves into suburbia where there are bird feeders as well. Crowned eagle, a vulnerable species and very, very shy in these areas. We know there are breeding pairs. This particular young bird was captured. It flew probably after a cat into the garage in the middle of Plet. And was slightly injured, so it was kept over the weekend and fed it up until it looked all right. And then that's Dr. Mark Brown just releasing the bird. And I must tell you, this bird is huge, and it's a juvenile. There's a close-up of its face, and it's not the beak that Mark was scared about, it's the talons. The talons can lift up a small dog quite easily. So if you get those embedded in your hands while you're ringing it, it's a very sad state of affairs. Long-crested eagle. 7 years ago, we never saw a long-crested eagle in the garden route, or occasionally we would see one on the verges of the territories. Now long-crested eagles have moved down and are quite common to see in most of the wetland areas and grassland areas. They rodent feeders, sit on medium to low posts, and wonderful to see it. I just love looking at this bird. He looks so intent when he looks at you with his crown of feathers above his head. In the Devasselot campsite, and even if you're not staying in the huts here, it's worth a walk through the forest here. Neisner woodpecker is a near-threatened bird, and it is an endemic. And these can be heard first before you see them. And I know many, many birders would like to get this bird on the tick list. This is the place to find them, in the garden route. Olive thrush, as against the split, which was the Karoo thrush. This one is slightly different and only found in the garden route. White-starred robin, this is again a special bird to find. And I was sitting in the car excuse me, in the Devasselot camp, and the bird here plus his youngster came and sat right opposite me. So they are there, they're easy to, no, they're not easy to find. Sorry, they're difficult to find. But when you find them like this, especially with the young, they're much easier to be able to pick up. Lemon dove used to be called the cinnamon-breasted dove, and again, cinnamon-breasted describes the bird. Not quite sure where the lemon comes in, but that's who he is now. A tambourine dove, this is a very, very shy bird. We released one yesterday that had been chewed by a dog, and they are very difficult to see. They're very, very rapid flyers in the low undergrowth of the forests, but when you do get to see one, they're really special birds. We then go to the Groot River estuary, which I showed you in a photograph looking down from the top of the mountain, and the river that runs into the estuary called the Groot River. And this is special for two specific birds. And there's, you're looking up into the forest area where the river stream comes down. And we've got the half-collared kingfisher, which nests in the riverbanks. And we got a whole series of photographs from a little hide sitting in the middle of the river, watching the half-collared kingfishers feed their young. It's a very fast-flying, very ice blue sort of bird. And then you've got the African finfoot, which is quite regularly seen on this river, and you've probably got to get up quite early in the morning to see this. Some of the forest walks in Nature's Valley, and the one that most people want to see is a yellow-throated woodland warbler, which is a canopy bird, and you have to, again, get the bird's neck syndrome to see this little bird. And the most sought-after bird in this forest is the Marina trogon. It's got those remarkable colors. And there's another shot taken by a friend of mine. When you see these birds, it's quite fantastic. They can't believe they've got this incredible red color on their chests. The best time to see them, October, November, when they start breeding and they start calling. Top of the pass is the tall fynbos, and we get things like white-browed scrub robin, which have come into the area and seen quite regularly in the garden route now. And will you believe this, Mark Brown ringed an Eisner woodpecker, and before the bird flew off, it sat on his shoulder. Victorins warbler, the second most difficult bird to find other than an Eisner warbler. It's a fynbos bird. It makes a loud noise like all warblers. It's difficult to see, and this photograph took me 5 hours to get. But patience is rewarding if you want a photograph of the Victorins warbler. Black-bellied starling, smallest of the starlings, typical black belly, but it has a remarkable thing that it can change its eye color. And I've had one in the hand where it's changed from red to yellow. So not quite sure why it does this. It obviously is a temperament thing, but it can change its eye color almost at will. Black-collared barbet, we never had these in the garden route. They've now, over the last 6 or 7 years, come down, migrated, expanded their range, and they started breeding here now. The same with the collared sunbirds, the male on the right and the female on the left, have migrated downwards and are common birds in our forests lines now. The grey sunbird, a very noisy bird, and the male can be picked up by its little red tufts. Otherwise, you might muddle it up with some of the female double-collared sunbirds. Again, was a bird that was not found in the garden route, and it's now found everywhere. It's expanded its range. We now take a short trip by car to the end of our garden route, which is the Storms River mouth, and we look at various species here: forest buzzard, Victorins warbler, terrestrial brown bull, Cape bulbul, Cape atlas, Cape gannet, white-starred robin, white-breasted cormorant, parasitic jaeger, subantarctic skua, common tern, sandwich tern, and greater crested tern. Here's some of the trails that you can do when you get to Storms River. And they have a unique system of bridges going across the river, and there's obviously lots of water sports associated with these, but again, you've got very little beaches. It's mainly a rocky coastline, and here are some of the tern species that you find here. Here's a typical rocky outlet which is, and there are no real beaches here. It's all like this, and the forests. But the start of the Otter Trail is here, and it ends up at Nature's Valley, and that's one of the most famous trails. I've done it twice. I could never do it again, but it's well worth doing. And that comes to the end of our birding tour of the Garden Route National Parks. And there's a few credits I must give Bruce Ward-Smith for helping me put this together and to come on the birding trip with me, Ian Pletzer, Albert McLean, Dion Hoon and Pat Raymond for some of their photographs. We have two bird clubs, the Lakes Bird Club, the chairman's Pat Nurse, and the BirdLife Plettenberg Bay, and the chairman is Steve Serpentine. We've got three qualified bird guides, Ian Pletzer, and the details are there, Tim Carr and Colin Wiley. And should you want to find any of these birds, preferably in the summer season, I suggest you contact one of these guides to help you find those birds. That ends my birding tour of the Garden Route National Park. I hope I've whetted your appetite a little bit. Thank you, Christina.
Wow, Mike, that was a fantastic tour of the garden route, and beautifully illustrated by your amazing photos. So thank you very much for your time in putting that all together, and all the many hours that you've spent taking photos of these birds. So I actually have a confession to make. I'm fairly new to birding properly, and although I've been to the garden route a number of times, I've never actually birded there properly. So this has very definitely whet my appetite, and I can't wait to get out and pay you a visit and go birding. There's a number of species that I would need to pick up there. So yeah, thank you very much. That was a lovely talk. So just to tell everyone in the audience, if you'd like to pose a question for Mike, you can put them in the Q&A box or in the Facebook Live comments. I see a couple of people have put up their hands in the Zoom room. If you've done this wanting to ask a question, please put this in the Q&A box. And then I'd also just like to remind everyone to please participate in the post-webinar survey, which will pop up when you exit the webinar. It'll only take about 2 minutes of your time. And then next week, we will be kicking off with a series of webinars about biodiversity stewardship, and that will feature the work that BirdLife South Africa and our partners are doing in the grasslands and estuaries. So next week, Kevin McCann and Stephen McKean will start us off by giving an intro to this innovative approach to protecting biodiversity. So now onto some questions, Mike, if you're happy.
Try.
You covered this briefly in your talk, but what's the best spot to see the Knysna woodpecker?
There are several spots. The best that I've found is in the De Vasselot campsite in Nature's Valley.
Okay.
In Nature's Valley, I've just about always found the Knysna woodpecker there.
Okay.
That would be my. There are other places. You can find them above Knysna in the big forests there. But any of the three bird guides would have an up-to-date knowledge of where to find these things. But if I wanted to really just go and look for one, I would go there, to Vasselot campsite.
Okay. And then Jacques Smith asks, is summertime the best time to visit, or what season would you recommend? Right,
the breeding season for birds, and that's when they all sort of start making noises and are easier to find, and the migrants come in, would be from about October through to about April, March, April. And that would cover your breeding season. So any time during that period would be the top time to see birds, but a lot of the birds can be seen during winter as well, but obviously not the migrants, and the breeding birds out of breeding season are a little more difficult to find, but they're here.
Okay. And then Francis asks whether it's possible that they saw a Eurasian bittern in Swartklei on Friday, hanging out with the spoonbills in the dried grasses. Have you ever seen Eurasian bitterns in the area?
I personally haven't. And I haven't seen it reported, because there are a lot of very keen young birders around that area who are very quick to find these things, and I haven't seen it. I'm not saying it's impossible. There's nothing impossible with bird sightings, but I personally haven't seen
them. Okay.
But don't give up. Maybe you did.
And then I've lost the question. I'll let we go. Cassia asks whether there are any flufftails in the area.
Yes, there are.
Do you know what species?
Red-chested flufftails are quite common. I'll have to just check those. I think we've got 3 flufftail species here. Again, you need to get them during the breeding season when they're vocal. Otherwise, you don't hear them much at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one group of birds I still need to get on my list.
We'll get it for you next time you come.
Yes, definitely. I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah, that's fine. At the moment, you don't hear flufftails, but as you get into the breeding seasons, then you start hearing them. And then you've got to look hard for them.
Okay. Then Lindsay asks, what are your tips for seeing both Neisner and Victorins warblers without disturbing them? And I think that's a really important question around being an ethical birder. And you mentioned it a couple of times about not disturbing the birds, and especially the shorebirds, but also these more secretive kind of forest birds, is to, yes, get the tick and see the bird and get the photo, but also to be respectful and not disturb them. So do you have any tips for these warblers?
If you know where they are, and generally the bird guides will know where they hang out. They'll know their territory, because these birds, particularly the Neisner warbler and the Victorins warbler, have very small territories. And if you know where they are, you can sit patiently and wait for them in that area. Unfortunately, they're most vocal when they're breeding, and that is the time when you should not play any callbacks or stuff like that, because you do upset breeding patterns. But they make a noise anyway. Early morning, these birds are shouting. So you just have to find the right place, sit down quietly and wait, and you will see them. As I said, I waited 5 hours for that one.
Yeah, patience is definitely required.
It's patience. And if you don't succeed, then you try again until you do, because you will in the end.
Yeah. And then Avi asks whether the City Falcon still visits the Emily Moon restaurant. And that's actually one bird that I have seen in Plet. We were passing through once and it was there, so we went to have a look.
Yeah, 9 years ago, we had a Cape Town birder staying at the lodge, and he saw this strange bird there, and the owner contacted Jeff McKillern and myself, and we dashed up there, took some photographs, sent them down to Cape Town, and they confirmed it was the sooty falcon. Now, whether it had been coming there before that time, we don't know. But from that time, it came for 9 years in a row, almost on the same day, and spent 3 weeks here killing bats and small birds in the air. It's an aerial hunter. And then it went back again. Last year, he didn't come back. So, and I think it's a she, by the way. I don't think it's a he. We did a lot of analysis of photographs and had consultations with people in the northern Mediterranean areas, and they believe it was a female. Now, whether it's just missed a year or whether it is now just not going to come back, we'll never know. But it didn't pitch this year. First in 9 years, 9 years in a row. So sorry, can't show you that one.
Wow. Well, hopefully it will come back, or another one will pitch up.
Who knows?
And then Louis asks if there's any sign of purple-crested turaco in the area, and any future expectation of this bird in the area. You mentioned quite a few birds that seem to be expanding their range, so I guess nothing's out the question, but has one ever been seen?
Which turaco?
Purple-crested.
No, we haven't seen that at all. Not at all. Not even a remote sighting at all.
Okay. Who knows with the other birds expanding?
You never know. You never know.
So there have been a lot of comments in the chat about your beautiful photos and a lot of compliments. So
thank you very much.
Go and read through those when you have a chance. But Marge asks about your photographic equipment. What do you use?
I use a Nikon full frame D810 camera together with a Nikon 200 to 500 zoom lens, and I do my best with that. With the new equipment coming up with mirrorless, I'm getting left a bit behind with equipment. Somewhere I've got to find some money to buy some new equipment one of these days. But that's what I use for my photographs. And generally, it's fine. Generally, it's fine.
Well, I would say all your photos tonight demonstrate that it is more than fine.
Thank you.
So I have a question myself. A lot of people are starting to keep a photographic bird list in addition to their, normal sighted list. Do you keep one? And what is your number?
I don't, but I would guess it's probably about 600. No, I lie, because internationally it would be a lot more, because I photograph birds in South America and Europe and places. But locally, I would guess it would be 600, but no, I don't keep the record.
Sorry. There was a question from Andrew asking about the crowned eagles. He asked whether there were any, and I think your one photo of the releasing the bird shows that they are, but where would you go to see them?
Now, that is not easy at all. They are only seen by chance. We have a group, which is part of the Sand Parks group, trying to find their nests all along the garden route. Being very shy birds, they nest in very inaccessible places, far from humans. So we still haven't found any confirmed nests yet, and sporadic sightings of the birds. I've seen one in Nature's Valley. My wife and I were walking through the forest and one flew right overhead. So they are there, and there's odd sightings come up, but if somebody asks, can I find you a crowned eagle, the answer would be no. You have to go to Natal.
Okay. Now a couple of people have asked, so Benjamin and Ineke have asked about where to go to see the Knysna warblers. And I think you did mention this, but maybe just describe again where to go for the Knysna warblers.
The Knysna warblers, I would suggest that the best way is to contact one of the guides or contact myself personally, and I can tell you where to go in what town and where you're likely to see them. It changes. They sometimes move their habitats. If you're in Plet or Knysna or Sedgefield, or we could direct you to areas where you could look out for them. No guarantee, there never is with a bird, but strong likelihood that at least you will hear them, even if you're a meter from them. And I'm sure you may have experienced that.
Yeah.
Very frustrating bird to photograph.
I can imagine.
Hugely.
So on that note, just about the bird guides, Letitia, and I'm sure a number of people asked whether you could just put up the slide with the bird guide's details again, so you can just start sharing again, if you don't mind. I think it's very useful to have those details on hand.
There we go.
There
so
we
you
go.
can
We
do
can
a
see that.
screen
Great.
grab if you like, and then pick it all up.
Yeah. So we can just leave that up for people to copy down or take a screenshot. And then another question, Sitembiso asks that, well, says, I believe you've got very big yellowwood trees in the area. Do you ever see Cape parrots?
No, which is, to me, quite unusual. I would expect them to be down here. We have never seen the Cape parrot extend its territory down this area. Never.
Okay.
You have to go up to Hogsback and places like that to see them.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're always on the lookout. You never know.
You never know.
There are yellowwood trees here. There's plenty food to eat. They just have to find it.
Yeah, that's one of the great things. One of the great things about birding is you never know what's going to turn up.
Yeah.
And so on that note, Debbie asks about the juvenile Allen's gallinule that's pitched up in wilderness.
Yes.
That is, it is alone, just as a juvenile without the parents.
Yes.
So she's asking where would the parents be, but I would imagine this bird just kind of got lost and went in the wrong direction.
No idea at all. It's a mystery how some of these strange birds get so far out of their territory. And I mean, if you go and see the bird, you sit behind the park fence in your car, and it quite happily feeds up and down in front of you. You just sit there and take photographs. It's quite endearing, and how it gets and how does it go back again? A lot of these birds are way out of their territory. We've had some very strange birds down here, and I don't know if they go back or whether they die. I absolutely no idea, or how they got here in the first place.
Yeah.
Lots of theories, but no proof.
Well, hopefully they make their way back somewhere successfully.
I hope so. I hope so.
But yeah, it's certainly provided quite a bit of excitement, I think, in the area. And
still there. If you're coming up, it's still there.
Well, there you go, everyone. And Andrew Keys asks, when last did you see an African cuckoo hawk?
I would say 6 months ago from my veranda.
Oh, wow.
and I got some nice photographs of it too, but I didn't put it on. But they're around. Nature's Valley up in that tall fynbos. There's a pair that's quite regularly seen there, not so much during the winter months. Whether they move away or just go down, I don't know, but they are there and you can find them. We've had probably 4 or 5 different sightings last year of African cuckoo hawk.
Okay.
Again, I can't guarantee you the one if somebody says, find me an African cuckoo hawk. You come and sit in my veranda for 6 months and maybe you'll find one.
Yeah, I think with these raptors, they're, yeah, can't be guaranteed.
No.
Then Ted Vermeulen asks about the organization that you mentioned, rescuing birds and rehabbing them.
Yes.
Is that, asking what organization that was? Is that
okay, there are a few. There's a raptor rescue, which specializes in looking after raptors, and that's probably what he was referring to, because I did mention that we had just released a peregrine falcon that got badly dazed with hitting a car, and they do a lot of good work looking after and rehabilitating raptors. They also run a show with their birds that cannot be released, black eagle with bad feet and stuff like that. And it's well worth popping in there just outside Knysna. Also, the local vet looks after some of the smaller birds and rehabs them. And Taniqua Wildlife Rehab do the penguins in particular. So we've got 3 registered areas where they do rehabilitation work on injured birds.
It's great to have people in the area looking after these injured birds and releasing them successfully again.
Yes, it is. It's very rewarding to watch a peregrine falcon fly after being left for dead on the side of the road. And it took off and it was magnificent, absolutely brilliant, apart from the fact I missed the critical photograph. But
always need to have that camera ready.
Lovely to see it fly.
Penny Abbott is asking about your slide with the Knysna Turaco,
yes.
asking what the plant was that it was perched next to.
I thought somebody would ask that. That was on my veranda of my house, which I don't live in now, sold it, but we had, Carol used to feed the turacos and they were basically hand-fed. And that was a flower she had flung out from a protea. I just stuck it in there. and the bird landed right next to the flower and I couldn't resist taking a photograph. Sorry, Penny.
I did think it was a bit unusual for a Turaco to sit next to a pincushion, but
trust Penny to pick it up.
How are we doing for time? We can answer another couple of questions if you're still happy.
I'm happy to try.
Anthony asks or says, I believe there used to be owls in the Kola Beach Sedgefield area.
Yes.
Would you know where they've migrated to, or have they just been kind of pushed out?
Owls or they're peregrines?
Owls.
Owls. There's a lot of spotted eagle owls all over the garden route, and a lot of them are in the residential areas. We've had a couple of Cape eagle owls, but we've never found where they're nesting. They're sort of up in the mountain areas a little bit, in the crags. And I found one entangled in a fence and was rehabbed, but I've never seen one actually in the wild in the garden route. And then grass owls are being found now quite frequently. And a grass owl, I've only seen a dead one and a caged one in the garden route, and now we're seeing them. We've got one in rehab at the moment that was hit by a car just outside Knysna, and it's almost ready to be released. The vet had to do some quite serious reconstruction of its wing, but it's going to be able to fly. So those are the main owls we get here, and the barn owl, of course. Yeah, barn owls all over the place. Wood owls, again, it's mostly in the camps and the forests. And the really difficult one is the grass owl, which we are now trying to find where they're breeding and to kind of protect the areas and at the same time allow people to view them without disturbing them. So was there anything specific about an owl, or was?
No, it was just whether they were still around that area.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably talking about the spotted eagle owls that were at the bread basket Lapan. They didn't nest there last year, but they did the year before, and they might well just come back. They all over Knysna, spotted eagle owls. They regularly nest in the town.
Yeah. And then I think we'll just take one last question. This is from Eleanor Mary, who's an avid Conservation Conversations listener, asking just to remind her and me actually of the name of the bird that you said changes its eye color from red to yellow.
Black-bellied starling.
Thank you. Such an interesting
starling. It's a little starling with a black belly. It's the smallest of all the starlings. and he's a forest bird. So he's home in the forests here. They are reasonably common to find. They're very chatty, so you can hear them before you see them. But if you ever have the opportunity to really watch it closely, it's odd. It's really strange. What you look at your photographs and you see, goodness me, I know I took the same bird and they got different icons. Really odd.
Such an interesting physiological, I'm going to say adaptation, but I don't know what it would be adapting for, but
well,
very
there
fascinating.
was a report that the male does it during breeding season, but I dispute that. I've had them in the hand where they change the color. So it obviously, it's some psychological or reactive thing that happens that they can change their eyes. Why? I have absolutely no idea.
Very interesting.
It is. Lovely birds.
Yeah. Well, I think we will leave it at that and say once again, thank you very much to Mike for a lovely and very well illustrated talk, a comprehensive tour of all the great birding spots in the garden route area. So thank you very much again.
It's a great pleasure.
And there have been lots of positive comments in the chat, and I'll send you that transcript sometime tomorrow, so you can have a read through all the lovely comments.
Thank you, Christina.
So
and thank you to you and BirdLife for hosting these magnificent webinars. I mean, they really have been everybody's savior during this terrible COVID situation. I look forward to every Tuesday. You learn something and you don't have to go outside to do it. It's a wonderful thing you guys have set up. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. And yeah, a big shout out to Melissa Whitecross and Andrew de Block, the more regular conservation conversation hosts, for holding the fort for so long. It's been a great pleasure to be able to come into people's homes during this time and give them a bit of entertainment and education. Yeah, so thanks for that. It's been a great journey. So I think we'll leave it there for tonight. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and stay safe out there, stay warm, and remember that birding is a great kind of social distancing friendly activity that you can do out of doors. So yes, continue to go out there and see some birds and stay safe. Good night, everyone.